Hi there, it's Rose Marcus. Thank you for joining me. This is a talk on the planetary nodes. So let's begin. What exactly is a node? Well, a node is not an actual thing. It is, as in a planetary body, but it is an abstract point. It is the intersection point of where time and space meet. It's a convergence point. So an intersection of what? A node marks the intersection point of the orbital plane of a celestial body, the moon or any planet, with the plane of the ecliptic. And the ecliptic is the sun's apparent path as projected onto the celestial sphere. So it is the orbital travel of that planet intersecting with the plane of the ecliptic. So what I have on the screen here to the right, the larger item here is the south node, and on the bottom left we have the north node. And this gives you a little bit of perspective because we have great familiarity at the south node. The north node is something that is an evolving point. So let me just go to the next slide here. Here is a diagram of the moon's path around the Earth, the moon and the sun. You can see the tilt of the moon in relationship to to the sun's apparent path. And we have here the ascending node and the descending node. An ascending node, when we are standing on the Earth viewing the planet, it appears to be traveling north of the ecliptic as we view it. This is geocentric point of reference. And the descending node is when that planetary body travels south of the ecliptic as we view it. So because of that Earth's tilt, we will see these north and south nodes. Here is the orbital path of Pluto in relationship to the sun as we view it from Earth, and you can see this this very steep incline. So Pluto's north and south nodes are more steeply inclined than the moon. Commonly used in astrology are the moon's nodes. And why do we put the moon's nodes in the chart? They have been integral to astrology all the way through. Planetary nodes have been something that Dane Rudhyar wrote about it. Jeffrey Wolf Green, of course, insisted that they were very, very important. As the way you think about reading a book. You just don't start with any chapter. You start at the beginning and you work your way through. So the nodal axis, the south node in particular, gives us a historical frame of reference where we have come from, and the north node where we are going to. So each one of the planets outside of the sun, of course, will have a north and south node reference. Why do we use the moon so commonly? Well, again, the moon correlates to self and to self-development. It is the ego self, and of course that's how we evolve, and we evolve through our emotional body, and so this makes perfect sense. But as I said, each one of the nodes are going to give us a historical frame of reference. Here are the angles of the planets. Moon isn't on there, but the main planets here in relationship to the ecliptic. So you can see that Pluto is very steeply inclined and Uranus just a little bit. So because of that factor, you will find the north and south nodes of the moon are always located at exactly 180 degrees away from one another. If you have a south node at 9 Gemini, you're going to have a north node at 9 Sagittarius, right? But the planetary nodes are not typically at that exact opposition point. And as a matter of fact, Mercury and Venus, the inner planets, don't travel very far away from the sun, and there are 2 times of the year when the north and south nodes of Mercury and Venus will be conjunct. All right, so here we have the trinity of the past, present, and future. So we have the south node representing the past, the deep memory imprints that conditions our approach to our immediate experience. We're conditioned. We have habits and behavioral responses. A south node is a composite of past life circumstances, behaviors, issues, personalities that are shaping your soul's bottom line desires and needs. The north node represents the future point. This is the intended evolution. It is a resource or a shaping tool or a vehicle for the evolving reality. And, the north node, nothing works in isolation here. How the south and north node are being integrated into the present, into the here and now, into the moment. The natal planet represents the present, the integration or synthesis point. This is the dynamic intersection, the tension between the past and the future and how it's being integrated in the moment. We're always projecting our past into the future. This is also the intersection of fate and free will. So these, the south node, the north node, and the natal planet do not operate separately. They operate as a trio. They operate as a trinity. And as you explore and evolve the content of that south node, you are also stimulating growth at the north node. So you're stimulating whatever is taking place. The north node is an evolving point. So dependent on what the experience is of the moment, that north node is shaping. And again, any triggering of the north and south nodes are going to set up optimized environmental conditions and optimized circumstances by which the soul can experience, observe, and evolve. All right. Here are a list of the planetary nodes. The south node of Pluto, for example, between 19 and 22 of Capricorn. The north node also between those degrees. Now, please, when you're looking at this at a visual, it does look like the nodes are, north and south nodes are going to occupy the positions that are 180 degrees apart from one another. But this is not so. So they're within that range. And really it's very important to consider Pluto at 19 to 22 of Capricorn, that south node. The south node of Saturn, 18 to 30 degrees of Capricorn. And Jupiter's south node mainly ranging, it's just 29 degrees, but mainly ranging in the sign of Capricorn all the way up to 22. And where the transits are right now, we have Pluto back and forth between about 17 and 22 degrees of Capricorn since about 2017. Saturn is a 2.5-year cycle through any sign. It is particularly strong when it is in its own sign, which it is traveling right now. This is August of 2019. Saturn will it will complete its retrograde on September 18. It is traveling about 14 degrees of Capricorn at the moment. So over this next year through 2020 and into the start of 2021, Saturn is going to be finishing its transit in Capricorn and aligning with its own south node, opposing its own north node. All right. Jupiter is currently traveling in the sign of Sagittarius right now. On December 2nd of 2019, it will enter Capricorn. Jupiter is a 1-year transit through a sign. So it will meet up with its own south node and oppose its north node in 2020 as well too. Mars between 9 degrees Libra and 30 degrees Libra. For the south node, for the north node, 8 degrees Aries, 3 degrees Cancer, all the way to 3 degrees Cancer. Venus and Mercury, you have to draw up the chart to see where the positions of Venus and Mercury sit. Chiron hovers between 26 degrees Aries and 2 Taurus in terms of its south node, and Chiron's north node, 23 degrees Libra to about 6 degrees Scorpio. So when the south node's in Aries, Chiron's south node is in Aries, mostly its north node is in Scorpio. And when its south node is in Taurus, mostly its north node is in Libra. And there are just a couple of points in the year, I think again twice, sorry, it slipped my mind right at the moment, where they are in opposition Aries-Libra. Uranus, south node traveling 11 to 17 degrees of Sagittarius, and its north node 11 to 17 degrees of Gemini. And if you've been watching the transits, then you will know that Neptune is about 16 degrees of Pisces, which is forming a square to the Uranus nodes. And in 2019, we have had Jupiter in Sagittarius square Neptune in Pisces, and they have been picking up the Uranus nodes. So if you have any natal positions at any of these degrees, then you're going to find that the natal planet energy of whatever that planet is punched up for you. And so they are worth watching. If you, wherever the south nodes of, or north and south nodes of Saturn and Pluto are in particular, and Jupiter, if they're not aspecting anything directly in your chart, then it's going to be, you're going to be tuned into the collective vibration of that. We all have exposure to the collective. The south nodes of Pluto corresponds to the soul and the evolution of the soul, and Pluto's nodes here really simply represent that. The south node in particular is the historic vault, as I say, and some people might even refer to it as Akashic Records, but I think of it as our psychic DNA. And these nodes really show us where we are connected to the totality of creation. Nothing is separate in the manifest universe, and we are not separate from anything that is manifest. Let me see if I said all that I wanted to say. Yeah, and so the sun is the life-giving force of our solar system and of our physical being here on Earth. So when a planet intersects with the ecliptic, it is being given life. It's gaining an energy infusion. It's a creative infusion. I think of, like lighting a match, lighting a match, and how that's kind of this flare. Or think of it as a flash of light, when bright light hits your eyes, how your eyes hold that light for a while. A node is an imprint with impact. As a cosmic influence, the planetary nodes are trigger points along the orbital track. They're infused with the energy pulse, the magnetic energy pulse of the planets. They are demonstrative of a process, of an evolutionary arc that is embedded deep within our deeper consciousness. So as I just said here, the planetary nodes demonstrate how innately connected we are to the energy of the cosmos as a whole. So when you begin to study the planetary nodes, I just want to go back here for a sec here. It can seem overwhelming because it really crowds the chart. But astrology is best learned through observation and correlation. So put them into a chart and observe them. Observe where those nodes are. And again, we might think that we can kind of reduce that if we've got 3 planets, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto, that are all in the same signs, north and south nodes, and they're just 2 other sign axes: Neptune, south node Aquarius, north node in Leo, and Uranus, south node in Sagittarius, north node in Gemini. Neptune is where we are sourcing again from universal source, and Uranus represents again cellular memory. Uranus represents what we call the individuated unconscious. This is our long-term memory. And Neptune is the collective unconscious, or the attunement of the collective, of the masses, of global consciousness, right? So very, very worth noting. And I have to say that really, when we're looking at the Capricorn Cancer transits, it is indicative of an evolutionary process. But I tell you, just watching the triggers made by the north and south nodes of Uranus are pretty significant. Anytime that they have been triggered, radicalism, terrorism, suicide bombers, weather extremes, there's been a lot going on, and those planetary triggers by mutable. Of course, we've got big action going on. Neptune squaring Uranus nodes are still happening. Yeah, so we've got just a tremendous amount going on. And here, this next slide. Here, the transiting nodes of Pluto. Now, this is a little beyond the scope for what I wanted to talk about today, but the planetary nodes move very slowly over great lengths of time. And what I've got here on the screen now, the transiting nodes of Pluto, as you can see, 500 to about 2500 AD, south node in Capricorn, north node in Cancer. This is representative of an age of humanity. So we've got the world ages, the great year, and so forth, and that's a fascinating study on its own. Pluto's nodes stay in Cancer and Capricorn for about 2,500 years, and Mars, which is the lower octave of Pluto, also does that. And so that's very interesting in terms of our philosophy and evolutionary astrology. Pluto representing the big picture soul, the collective soul. It also represents the generations. Pluto traveling 12 to 30 years in its own sign. You're going to have the collective reference. Then based on the sign that your Pluto's in, you're going to have the generational, and where Pluto and those nodes are sitting in your chart, then that's going to be specific information. So we have, a time of culmination. Pluto's transit through Capricorn signifies the ending of an era. Empires rise and fall on that transit. And 248 years ago was the rise of a superpower nation we call the USA. And we can see Capricorn, Pluto in Capricorn is the breakdown of existing reality, the breakdown of structures, all structures. And this is borders and boundaries change, political, economic structures change, the structure of consciousness changes. So we are at a really, really important time as a collective, as a species, as inhabitants of this planet. This is no ordinary passage of time. It's no ordinary Pluto transit through Capricorn. It is the marker. When we come to Capricorn, the 10th sign of the zodiac, we are 3/4 of way around the wheel. And Capricorn is the archetype that suggests that a long journey is now coming to a completion point. As a duality archetype, Pluto does 2 things. It's the beginning of the end and the end of the beginning. So we have a transition point, of restructuring of significance, an entire chapter of reality and of human collective evolution is now reaching a culmination and ending point while the seeds of a new reality are being sowed. And with contacts to the nodes, this is accelerating and amplifying the work that is to be done for this particular timetable along our evolutionary timeline. So reality shift of great significance. Nothing is to be underestimated here. All right. And one other thing I need to say as well, too, is that the planetary nodes, sometimes you will see them, one node will be retrograde and the other not. And you may have planets in your natal chart that are retrograde. Retrograde means to revisit and relive. So when you have a planetary node retrograde, that is going to be to revisit, relive something specific. So it's going to tie in something specific. If you have a retrograde planet, then it's going to be even more specific. So we just keep, kind of narrowing it down, and picking up from whatever past is significant or key to your particular evolution or the evolution of the time-space reality that we are living through. And let me also say that the nodes, where the moon's orbital path intersects with the sun and how that all lines up with the earth, those are the trigger points where eclipses take place. So a solar eclipse, a new moon, a lunar eclipse, a full moon occur relative to the nodal axis, the moon's nodal axis. So a new moon happens when the new moon is within about 17.25 of either lunar node, and the lunar eclipse, the full moon, within 11.38 of the ecliptic longitude of either node. Okay, so again, just giving you a demonstration of how very important that is. So the moon correlates to our egocentric consciousness, and from lifetime to lifetime, the soul will create an ego as a focusing lens. And it is through ego awareness and ego development, through self-awareness and self-development, that the soul navigates its way through human experience. All right, so the soul creates an ego in which to reflect upon its desires and needs, which to observe its desires and needs. And the ego is like the focusing lens in the camera for the soul. It is the same way with source, or the divine, or universal energy, or whatever you want to call it, God, goddess. It will project a self-image, an individualized soul through which it can reflect upon its desires and needs for its own evolution. All right, let me move to the next slide. So here we have Pluto. Pluto representing the underlying bottom line, evolutionary core desires of the soul for its own evolution. Natural law of evolution. Pluto simply correlates to evolution itself, the evolutionary process. Pluto's south node in Capricorn, the past of the collective soul, as I said previously, the historical vault, how humanity has evolved, what has defined its past. This is manifestation through the time-space reality that we know, right? There's a direct correlation to the transition from the matriarchy to the patriarchy, matriarchy representing natural law. Capricorn and its polarity Cancer are cardinal archetypes. Cardinal archetypes are activation archetypes here. Again, as I said, it's beyond the scope of this particular lecture, but the Pluto South Node in Capricorn begun in the Capricorn sub-age of the Cancer age, about 6500 BCE. This is representational of that the evolutionary shift from matriarchal consciousness, that of living, in harmony with nature, to the development of laws and standards by which we could live in an organized whole. So as the patriarchy came over, it established a consensus. And consensus is not bad. We all have to learn how to live in an organized whole. But through this past age, the laws, the customs, the cultural references, and how that's all been conditioned, we have come to understand ourselves as separate from nature, which is separate. It has created this out of sync with natural rhythms and natural laws and natural ways of creating and being and making our way through the world. So the patriarchy is, again, hierarchies, established of rules and regulations and so forth that have become the basis of our own inner conditioning, our own inner judgment that says this is the way reality has to be. And in terms of those hierarchies, again, we've learned that God exists outside of self, or God is on high. And as we are a reflection of God or made in God's image, the hierarchies go that if we are following the system, then that man is superior to man, man is superior to woman, man is superior to beast, man is superior to nature. And it is the distortions of all of that that are the root cause of everything that we see that's wrong in the world today. And of course, we will all have to agree with knowing that there's something very vastly out of sync when children are not safe to sit in their classrooms, right? Okay. All right. So the transit of Pluto over its own south node right now, these past few years, coming off the Pluto-Uranus square years, 2011 to 2016, and 2017 starts this transit of Pluto over its own south node, connecting us to our deeper consciousness, our deeper past. So this is an intensification and acceleration of evolution. Any planet on a south node is going to be a condition of relive, fruition, or a combination of both. So this accelerates the metamorphic process. Pluto, involution and evolution, building form to destroy form to build form again. Pluto transits Pluto over its own south node is bringing structures, bringing reality to an end. It is no less than the ending of an era, an ending of an age of humanity. So the intention and evolutionary necessity is now to eliminate the outworn and obsolete, to eliminate that which impedes evolution. And that includes the artificial gender standards and roles. Capricorn and Cancer correlate to gender identity. And we have this transition of the ages. It's not for the feminine to rise over the masculine. That would be a kind of a patriarchal consciousness coming in. But for the resurrection of the feminine, for the feminine, half for yin, to reclaim, her natural birthright. And I really think that this blending here is a refinement of yang, picking up more yin energy, and yin picking up more yang energy. So it's not about the war between the sexes, but of coming into more unified whole, which is what the intention is. Pluto North Node in Cancer, the intended evolution is for regeneration. This is the evolution of the subjective consciousness, the evolution of identity, the evolution of the collective ego, the collective image here. It is the greatest possible psychological subconscious transformation that is possible for an individual, for the collective. The Pluto North Node in Cancer, the intention here is for a rebirth, a restructuring, a resurrection of core identity and collective self-image. It is for us to foster the global family. We are all here together. Habitat for humanity, I put it, to nourish, nurture, preserve, and protect our home, Mother Earth, and our global family. Those are all good Cancer words. We are caretakers, not owners of this planet. And so this Pluto North Node in Cancer is suggestive of the resurrection of matriarchal consciousness. And as I said, not female over male, but inclusive over exclusionary. Reverence and protection for all living things. And, these are the positive attributes of that North Node in Cancer, the intended evolutionary forward. And everything that I have on the screens that are following yet are the best versions of the North Nodes. But we have the positive, and then we have the distorted versions of that. Pluto North Node in Cancer can accomplish the evolutionary intention by making us vulnerable. And that is exactly what we are facing right now. Cancer is an insecure archetype, and it is through creating greater degrees of insecurity that lead us to, to the fear base that is so rampant on our planet today. And trigger the kinds of responses that we see in terms of exclusionary. Capricorn rules the skin, and we have a resurgence of things like racism, and again, things like white supremacy and so forth. Pluto was discovered near its own south node in the 1930s. And that was the time when Hitler was rising to power, and we have a resurgence of neo-Nazism and so forth, right? So we have fear bases. One way or another, Pluto will accomplish the evolutionary journey. So I was just thinking as well, too, Pluto rules genetics, right? The Pluto South Node in Capricorn, that's our psychic genetics or psychic DNA. Pluto's North Node in Cancer rules water, and I think there's a genetic mutation going on with the water that we drink. And that is based on all the pollution of the water, everything we put in it, including the fact that most of us are taking medications or drugs of some kind, birth control and so on, that is, into the water, and then we recycle that and we drink that, and it's a mutation. And it's quite interesting that that we have an evolution of genders right now here. I mean, transgender and bisexuality and all those kinds of things have been on the planet since day one, but we may be seeing more blending there. So it's thought-provoking, to say the least. Okay, Uranus, the Uranus South Node is in the sign of Sagittarius, and I didn't mean to do that. The individuated unconscious Jungian term. This is our long-term cellular memory. And Uranus is the archetype of liberation and freedom and individuation. But it's also that cellular memory. Contained within cellular memory, Uranus corresponds to trauma consciousness. And, trauma consciousness, if you have the Uranus nodes being activated in your chart, you're going to readily resonate with some deep trauma from your history, from your past lives. So as I said, those are really important nodes to look at. The Uranus South Node in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is the archetype of nature and of natural law. It's the intuitive component as well, too. So here we have Uranus South Node in Saturn, representational of the collective memory of living in relationship or in sync to nature and natural law. This is our connection to nature and to the realm of the sensory or intuitive faculty, right? It is representational of the flourishing and migrations of peoples, hunter-gatherer times, nomadic times. the invention and migration of beliefs, religions, philosophies, cultures, customs. It is the consciousness beyond our time-space reality of other realms. And so, some people think that they, that their origins exist on other planets, and why, South Node in Uranus, in Sagittarius. The North Node in Gemini, vehicle for evolution, the toolkit forward, is found through diversification. Diversification of the gene pool was one way that humanity was able to survive and multiply, right? So that's one thing here. Vehicle for evolution found through diversification, through technological advances that have modernized and improved, daily life, right? This is globalization. Certainly, we've been accelerating how we get the information out and how we communicate. Education through the experiential, right? It's a simultaneous creative process here. How we're all downloading, the North Node in Gemini, correlates to the nervous system, and the nervous system is how we are registering the impulses and downloading all of that information. Reinvent the contemporary thought. The North Node in Gemini, to accelerate evolution. The intention forward is to reinvent contemporary thought, contemporary living. So that we are not living with the social structures that we have been, that are that are creating today's societies, and isolation, and all the things that it's been doing here. So new ways of communicating and learning from each other, and certainly there've been tremendous advances in the past few years with social media and so on. We can instantly download information nowadays. Modernization of concepts and beliefs to create new avenues and inroads. To invent new ways of labeling our reality, to apply what we know to the betterment of all, the equality of all peoples, all ways of life. And I said, let Mother Nature breathe. Uranus North Node in Gemini, the distorted piece of that is shock to the system, right? And the challenges to the breath of life. And isn't it interesting that right now, as I'm doing this lecture, that the lungs of the planet are burning, the Amazon rainforest, So again, here we have this shock wave, meant to raise the collective consciousness, and meant to help us to recognize that, again, as like I said, that none of us are separate, and that we all have to pool our resources together in order to thrive for each one of us. Jupiter's nodes in South Node in Capricorn, North Node in Cancer. The nature of belief systems, philosophies, religions, faith, culture. Migration of ideas and peoples, intuition, natural instincts, and so forth. Jupiter, metaphysics, cosmology, all of that. And so we have a South Node in Capricorn, and we have the structural nature of the belief systems, cultures, philosophies, religions, teachings, and traditions of the past that have educated and conditioned one's present-day beliefs, philosophies, and cultural references. So this is our interpretation of reality, but based on those beliefs and teachings of the past. And this is how we envision our prospects of the future based on that knowledge, those teachings, those experiences, right? Jupiter's North Node in Cancer, the intended forward. Of course, the evolution of our belief systems and philosophies and cultural identities, faiths and religions. This is, again, Cancer is the archetype of the past, so we have to go backwards in order to go forwards. Jupiter North Node in Cancer, this is the rebirth of those cultural identities and so on, and we see quite a great movement of indigenous peoples reclaiming their teachings and their cultural ways and their languages and so forth, right? This is so very, very important that we don't lose any of these things, right? A Jupiter North Node in Cancer to foster greater levels of security, safety, self-consistency that will support, nourish, and sustain the desired growth. The key to the future is found in the past. This is to recreate, upgrade the individual and collective self-image. Evolution requires the revisioning of concepts regarding safety and security. Our beliefs create our reality, and it's really time that we change that, right? It is an increased need to be better caretakers of the planet. The rebirth, as I said a few moments ago, belief systems, philosophies, cultural and ethnic conditions. We need to retrace our origins and reconnect with our roots, come back to that matriarchal consciousness, and that is caring, sharing, and inclusion, not primitive or, not at all, but to be able to align with what is most natural for ourselves in terms of what is going to supply us with the proper nourishment, right? The rebirth of the collective image and self-image of the feminine, that's definitely something that we are very necessary to do now, right? And again, as I said, the distorted piece of that, Jupiter is an increase, Jupiter North Node in Cancer, increasing the fear, increasing the need, increasing the vulnerability. And again, great challenges regarding things like water, our aquatic life are in great danger, and so on, right? Saturn, structure of consciousness. Saturn represents conditioning patterns of the past or relationship to external authority, i.e. parents, church, and state. The systems and structures that have defined our existence, the systems and structures that we know today. And we see democracy and all those kinds of systems here now in being greatly challenged. So our South Node in Capricorn, this is our collective history, the age of civilization, representing the development of the age of the patriarchy, control of the masses via man-made religions and laws. These are things that are artificial or manufactured. There's some things that are just not natural for us to do. The structure of our collective consciousness, structural nature and needs of the past, and how we're still recreating that or falling back on that. Our exposure to external authority over great lengths of time and the conditioning factors that have shaped the past and our present day reality. So consequences of the past into the present, right? North Node, Saturn's North Node in Cancer, that intended forward to restructure the collective consciousness in its systems. So that's crucial and important to do. The system is crumbling, and within that, a new system is coming into play. History is repeating itself. So, when it comes to losing control, those who are able to manipulate the system are going to attempt to exert more control in order to reclaim that security or reclaim that dominance. So we see more despots, in places of rulership right now. And again, it feeds the collective fear, right? Collective fear. That's exactly it. We are revisiting the past now in order to create a more secure foundation for building the future. Those that are neo-Nazis or white supremacists, are just running in fear and feeling that that's the direction for security, hunkering down more. It's really scary times. To move beyond existing limitations or conditioning that stifles growth. This is the South Node in Cancer. It necessitates that we become internally secure, to shift our judgment regarding what is necessary to support and sustain life, to contribute in a way that is inclusive rather than than self-interest and exclusionary based. To be responsible citizens and caretakers of the planet, to establish the global family. It takes a village. And, Saturn correlates to the knees, and certainly we will be under pressure as a collective and brought to our knees by Mother Nature, who is the ultimate authority, if we don't, smarten up and become responsible and so forth, to shift and to create greater morality on the planet. And, I think I've done enough of the soapbox there, but, nothing opens the heart more than desperation and need. And, cancer is an archetype of compassion. And we have to learn how to have compassion. Every time we see of a great tragedy, somebody getting killed or, what have you, the whole world weeps. And it is for us to, take responsibility to make the changes so that we're not afraid of one another and that we're not afraid of sharing or supporting one another's. If you thrive, I will thrive. If I thrive, I'd like you to thrive too. We should all go together. Neptune, the search for ultimate. All of our ultimates are there. Ultimate value, meaning, and truth. Neptune shows how we're interlinked and interrelated. It is the consciousness that permeates all, the source of all things. This is collective or mass attunement, the collective unconscious. Spiritualization of consciousness. This is a dissolution of boundaries between the subjective ego and subjective soul, between subjective soul and source. The Neptune South Node in Aquarius, this is how the ultimate source projected itself into the time-space by an electrical energy charge. It's the Big Bang Theory here. Really the nodes really demonstrate how we got here, okay? The Neptune South Node in Aquarius are spiritual roots, infinite source, the living universe. The universe is conscious. It's alive, it's conscious, and it's breathing. The totality of consciousness is alive and conscious. Everything is energy, including our thoughts, our thought waves, right? South Node in Aquarius is technological, social, and political advances that have modernized our collective reality at various points throughout time. And it also represents the imprints of collective trauma, Aquarius, Uranus, that are active within the collective memory. It also ties us to our spiritual roots, correlating the last Aquarian age. And, again, here's no surprise that, people have remembrances, or that somewhere in our, our memory pools, we have some sense of Atlantis. That'll be that South Node in Aquarius, right? Neptune's North Node in Leo, the vehicle for growth, our evolutionary forward, is through the heart journey. This is the heart chakra planet. We evolve through the emotional body. And the Neptune North Node in Leo is conscious co-creation with the unified whole, to recognize and fulfill our special destiny, special being Leo. And that is to reclaim our birthright, to thrive, not only just survive. God wants us to thrive, believe me. God wants us to be creators, to recognize the goddess, to recognize ourselves, our roles as creator, and to realign our relationship to the totality of creation. You are divine. It is your divine birthright to create and to thrive. We are not separate from creation or the creative process, but we are integral to it. We are artists of the unified whole. So this Neptune North Node in Leo, the evolutionary forward here is to recenter consciousness and to create via the timeless truths that will transcend the limits of conditioning, the limits of the past, and sustain us for the times to come. All right. Lead us into an abundant future. Here's Pluto's discovery And again, the fact that Pluto was discovered near its own south node was because being along the ecliptic, the sun's path, shone more light in that region, and so Pluto was able to be discovered. You see Pluto's discovery at 17 degrees Cancer and retrograde in the chart here. Its north node was 18, and Saturn at 18 as well too. So this is an intensification and an acceleration point here, the retrograde pattern to revisit and relive. This is again a suggestion of intensification along the timeline. Pluto goes around every 248 years, is going to align with its planetary nodes. But this one is particularly significant because it is a timeline of manifest reality. This century, we're moving into now the culminating point of the age. And this is exactly what this Pluto discovery chart actually represents. And here is the lunar eclipse for January 10, 2020. January 12, Pluto and Saturn are going to be exact. And we have this stellium of planets in Capricorn. Jupiter will be in Capricorn. Look at this lunar eclipse. The lunar eclipse takes place at 20 degrees Cancer Capricorn. The transiting eclipse node is smack dab on the north node of Pluto. And the eclipse sun is on the south node of Pluto. That Pluto-Saturn conjunction is balsamic to the south node of Saturn and the north node of Capricorn. So we still have some finishing off to do. This is election year in the US. Again, Capricorn rules the political, economic systems and so forth, So so this is, a trigger point for all of that. Notice Jupiter's position at 8 degrees of Capricorn, and Jupiter will be transiting over, it's in an exact opposition to its own north node and approaching its own south node. Notice that the position of Neptune at 16 degrees Pisces is square the south node of Saturn at 15 degrees of Sagittarius. Now I took out the extra planetary bodies here just to make the chart look very simple, but Mars is, I think, at this time about 4 degrees of Sagittarius, so it's going to go over and trigger the Uranus nodes here. Venus was at 20 degrees Capricorn, December 12, 13 of 2019. Mars and Jupiter over that Jupiter North Node at 20 degrees of Capricorn is March 19, March 22, between March 19, 22. Mars and Pluto conjunct at 24 degrees Capricorn, that March 20th vernal equinox 2020. This lunar eclipse is going to have a lot of transits that are going to trigger it. So it's not only this January 10th date. Of course, we have a lunar eclipse on December 25th of 2019, which will happen at 4 degrees of Capricorn. It's a solar eclipse with Jupiter at conjunct at 5 degrees Capricorn. So we're heading into a very significant transit here. Here's the another lunar eclipse. Sorry, I didn't realize I had this chart here. But again, you'll see here's Mars during that time, 4 degrees, about to go over its own south node, about to go over the south node of Uranus. the Venus position in the sign of Aquarius, and so on. These charts are fascinating, just absolutely fascinating to look at. The Uranus position, I meant to say this earlier, Uranus at 2 degrees, it's finish off in the sign of Aries, last degrees of Aries, and these first signs, first few degrees of Taurus are picking up the nodes of Chiron, and here's the north node of Chiron at 5 degrees. So Uranus is still picking up the healing crises archetype of Uranus, which is kind of a double statement on trauma consciousness and the importance of this timetable along our collective history. Here's the Brexit chart. Brexit. We have Mars in Libra on this. This is October 31st, 2019 at 11 p.m. is when they are scheduled for England leaving the EU. Whether it occurs or not, still up in the air. But if this chart happens, we have Mars in Libra is kind of a signature of divorce from the social group. It's a signature for an individuation. We have the south node of Chiron on the midheaven for this chart. We have the transiting moon on its way to the south node of Jupiter. And of course, we have Pluto and Saturn aspecting their nodes respectively. We still have Neptune, which is retrograde at 16 degrees, triggering the north node of Uranus again, and so forth. So again, we have a really important statement here. Libra is an archetype that rules monetary, and of course, this is all about the assets and resources and so forth. So we shall see what takes place there for sure. Here's Hong Kong with the secondary progressed wheel for now. And interesting to note in the progressed wheel here that the progressed sun is now in Leo. Of course, it's interesting to see that the Hong Kong's natal Pluto is at 18 degrees Aries, and its progressed Pluto position is 20 degrees Aries. And these Pluto positions are again, of course, picking up the north and south nodes of Saturn and Pluto in Cancer and Capricorn. Here is Donald Trump's chart, and look at how the nodes fall in his 10th and 11th houses. I mean, he's already got, Leo rising with the sun in the 10th house with Uranus, and, he thinks he's a chosen one. He's just said so recently on the news there. And he has here the south node of Venus on his Mercury in Cancer. Cancer rules the populace, and Mercury is a spokesperson. Gemini is a spokesperson. And he has Venus also, at north node of Venus on his sun. So both of these Venus connections here are showing his popularity. We wonder, why is this guy so popular? Well, that Venus south node to that Mercury is a suggestion that he is appealing to people. He is feeding their fear. We know that. He's appealing to the vulnerable aspects in the collective. And certainly he is, I think, very much fulfilling his role as the great disruptor. It's exactly what he's doing, this north node on that piece of disrupting the world economy. That's just alone, just between those two planetary symbols. His positions of Saturn and Venus in Cancer are aspecting those nodes again. He has a role to play on the collective, and it's not a very nice one. His Pluto at 10 degrees Leo on the north node of Neptune as well too. Again, bringing up, he has formidable creative presence. You know, when you have Neptune, it's an iconic figure, and he will be an iconic figure, but I think for all the wrong reasons. Ceres contact is a resurrection piece. And Ceres South Node. And, you know, there's a signature here that is a suggestion of that he has had stature in the past and maybe been, you know, had some lifetime as royalty. And if you look on the evolutionary astrology board, you know, there's a whole history of Donald Trump and a whole analysis of his chart, and we would see references to his natal chart. So I'll allow for you to go in and see all of that. That information there, but fascinating to look at how that sets up. Here's Donald Trump and the USA election chart at the time, November 3rd, 2020. I put 8 a.m., but I think it's debatable what time you might use, because elections start earlier and end at the end of day, but put it for the 8 a.m. Of course, we have Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn in the sign of Capricorn, picking up those nodes. So that's a very, very important election for the people of the US, and I'd say for the world, because, of course, it affects the global economy. During this US election, Mercury is retrograde at 25 degrees of Libra. And the USA chart, let me just see here. We've got the USA natal chart at, let's see, election for that. Sorry, I haven't got it in my head, but it's picking up let me just see if that next chart there. Yes, the USA natal chart has Mercury at 24 degrees retrograde. So that's a Mercury square. Here's the planetary nodes for the USA chart and for that election. Of course, you know, it's been widely discussed. The USA is about to experience its Pluto return over the next few years. And of course, you know, the transits are going through all of those Cancer, Capricorn, nodal axis pieces here. Here's China. China's in the news right now. China Revolution chart 1907, May 22, 1907. And you can see these nodes here. The secondary progressed for the eclipse in January. And just wanted you to note that the progression here puts Venus, Sun, and Mercury in Virgo in the 10th house. And that is picking up trines to the north and south nodes of Pluto and Saturn in the second house. I'll say that, you know, this is a suggestion that second house is a resource archetype, and it does suggest here that that China can play on the world vulnerability to kind of sneak in the back door, I would think. You know, it already has bought up most of Africa and owns a great deal of the debt in the USA as well, too. So I think that China is, you know, in line for the next superpower. Excuse me. Yes, and there we come to the end of my talk today. There's so much more in these planetary nodes, and I invite you to research them yourself and to simply put them in the chart and to you know, to just observe them as they are being triggered. And I thank you for joining me today.